Welcome on behalf of the UpCounty Democrats, a coalition of affiliated clubs of MCDCC that brings together UpCounty Democrats from legislative districts of 14, 15, 17, and 39. Today is the first of two BOE candidate forums organized by the UpCounty Democrats. The second one is scheduled Tuesday, April 23rd at 7 p.m. My name is Sunil Dasgupta. I host I Hate Politics podcast, where we do in-depth candidate interviews. And together with candidate forums like this, we hope voters will have the breadth and depth of exposure to candidates. Thank you all for joining today. And thank you to all the candidates for stepping up into an arduous process, opening yourself up to public praise and criticism, for convincing your families that the sacrifice is worth the less time they get from you. Locally, the BOE races are perhaps the most important local races. The school system is believed to be in transition. Interim superintendent, there's an interim superintendent in place and a search for a permanent one. Questions about transparency and accountability swirl. Reading and math test scores are barely inching up since the pandemic. Meanwhile, 46% of the county's budget, over $3.1 billion, goes to the school system. And there has been a demand to give the county council ability to attach strings to certain parts of the operating budget. Where is the BOE? Where are we going? Where is MCPS? Where is public education? We'll begin with a 2-minute opening statement from each of the candidates. Then I will ask questions and call on a candidate who will get 2 minutes to say their answer. If someone goes over the time limit, we have a designated muter. Please don't take that personally. I will begin with questions, with opening statements and then questions from the top. I have your names alphabetically, and so I'll start with Brenda Diaz, who's first, and then go down that line when I start asking questions. For the statement now, I'll call on. Let's go from the. Let's start at the bottom, and I will call on Natalie Zimmerman to start us out.
Good evening. Thank you so much to our hosts and also to Sunil for moderating. Part of my opening statement, I want to talk about why I want to run, why I want to be in this position. I am currently a second grade teacher in MCPS. I teach at Wheaton Woods Elementary School, and teaching is the greatest joy that one can possibly experience. But part of this experience, I've also seen how our resources are not trickling down to our students, especially our students that are requiring, I'm so sorry. It's not trickling down to all of our students. Public education is absolutely the greatest act of optimism that we can put into our future, and it's the greatest investment that we can put into our students and all of our children. We need people on the Board of Education who have actually been in the classroom and know what's happening. Every day, my day-to-day life is being in a classroom and being in an MCPS classroom. Someone who has connections to students, connections to educators, having that actual peer experience to be able to bring to the table to elevate those voices. I believe that I can be that champion for our students and for our classrooms. Thank you.
Next, Aby Thioye, please.
Hello everyone. So I'm Abby. So 20 years ago, my two oldest children started MCPS, and at that time, I believe deeply it was one of the best school system that I could see based on my experience and when I came from. So everything was good, everything was perfect. The school program, I love everything. And also even the after school program they were doing was really great to me. Everything was good. However, after a few years and having more children that are attending the school, I started to notice some flaws. I started to notice that that school perfect that I was saying is not as perfect as what I believe at first. So the problems start arising, and then I believe deeply down that with everybody's help, we can uh, ameliorate the school system in Montgomery County. We can give better school to the children. We can have mere outcome. We can have more children performing at school at the highest level. So I believe that the school system can be ameliorated not only for the student, but also for the teachers, also for the counties and everybody involved. So I deeply believe that I can be part of that change. And if I'm giving the occasion to run, I'll be able to help uh, change the system that we have right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Rita Montoya, please.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Rita Montoya, and I'm a mom of 2 elementary school kids, a local PTA president, a former juvenile public defender, and a candidate for the at-large seat on the Board of Education. My own educational journey started with Head Start preschool and included community college, transferring to a 4-year university, and then graduating from law school. If elected, I will work hard to ensure that students and staff are free from physical harm as well as hate bias. Kids need both connections and consequences. It's neither restorative justice nor SROs alone that are going to fix the problem. Anti-Semitism and other hate bias is on the rise, and the fact that a U.S. House committee has asked the MCPS board chair to testify on the county's response to anti-Semitism just a few weeks ago, just for a hearing for a few weeks from now, is a sign of the extent of the problem. I will also work hard with MCPS to increase academic rigor, to provide students with tailored programs serving all student needs and learning styles, and aimed at closing the achievement gap. Closing the achievement gap doesn't mean that we have to lower standards. It means providing those who don't have what they need with what they need to achieve, like tutoring or homework help. If elected, I will also work very hard to rebuild public trust. Right now, there's a serious lack of transparency, and it's really impacting the daily lives of MCPS families and staff. MCPS must provide families and staff with culturally competent, clear, and timely released information. MCPS is facing many challenges, and in this moment, we need strong, decisive leadership. I've been doing a lot of forums, I've been getting to know all of my fellow candidates, and I feel as though on many issues, we're really dominated by extremes on either side. We all know that extreme solutions rarely work. I'm not here to be guided by philosophical or political postures or positions. I'm a pragmatic leader, and I'll fight for our students and the education they deserve. Thank you.
Thank you. Bethany Mandel is not here, so we'll skip and go to Melissa Kim.
Hi, everybody. My name is Melissa, and I'm running for the at-large school board seat. I decided to run because I got super frustrated with our school experiences. Absolutely, we were all impacted with this COVID-19 shutdown, but in particular, our kids lost a lot, both socially and academically. And I've not yet seen that we have done enough to make sure that our schools are to a place of high standards and one of joy. Specifically, when my child was in 5th grade, he wrote just one 3-paragraph essay during the entire school year, not because we had a bad teacher, he was a great teacher, but because that was the county standard for 5th grade rating. And that standard is far, far too low, which is painful to see because when my husband and I moved to Montgomery County nearly 20 years ago, we moved here for one reason, for the school system, because we were told this is the best one in the region. And this school system was one with high expectations. And clearly that example just doesn't cut it. It's frankly quite mediocre. So I'm really focused on this fact that our children, all of our kids, spend the majority of their waking hours at school. And I'm motivated now to strengthen and their school experiences now, not 3 years from now. I have been an elementary school teacher, a middle school principal, a chief academic officer, and a deputy superintendent. And I'm a first-generation immigrant who learned English language here, and for whom education was the key. And I'm a mom of 2 kids in MCPS, one in elementary school, one in middle school. I will bring all of my 25 years of education and system leadership to make sure our children have a much, much improved experience in school, certainly in both academics as well as social emotional development. And I definitely want to make sure that MCPS becomes a district of choice for educators across the country and certainly this region, where we're trusting our teachers to really support our kids in all areas. And most importantly, as a board member, I think it's important to hold accountable.
Sorry, we had to cut you off. Thank you very much. We'll move on to Sharif Hidayat now.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for having this forum for us to discuss what we bring to the Board of Education. My name is Sharif Hidayat. I'm a father of 2 children who attend elementary school at MCPS. I attended MCPS growing up in Aspen Hill. I'm a long life resident of Montgomery County. Lived in Montgomery County and also worked and served in Montgomery County as a police officer for over 2 decades. And in that role, I served as a Montgomery County as a community service officer. We worked hand in hand with the school resource officers. I was also a part of the truancy prevention program. Ms. Zimmerman was correct. She says we need to have somebody who has been in the classroom. Well, my dealings with kids is the kids that didn't attend class, and therefore they were at risk. So I dealt with a lot of at-risk kids at Argyle Middle School, making sure that the truancy prevention program got them back into class so she could teach these kids. Some professional experience, I'm a PTA member, I'm a delegate for the MCC PTA, so I listen to all the issues. And anybody, I think all the people here, the names I've seen on those meetings, and they're very long, very detailed. So I appreciate everybody that attends those meetings. So what's my goal for joining the board? It's academic excellence, but I also understand this. I bring a unique perspective that we can't get to academic excellence until these kids are in a safe environment. That's the expertise I bring, from bringing back the SROs to doing CRAZE training, to doing everything I can to ensure that the students have a safe place to learn in without distractions such as drugs, guns, and those cell phones that are creating such a distraction to the students. So that's the unique perspective, the uniqueness that I bring to the table. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. We'll move on to Brenda Diaz, please.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here tonight and listening to all of us presenting ourselves as Board of Education candidates. We are in a period of transition, and we are looking forward to all of us pushing towards excellence. So I'm so happy to be here tonight. So my name is Brenda Diaz. I'm running for Board of Education District 2. And why am I running? First and foremost, I'm deeply passionate about education. I've been a teacher for 20 plus years. I'm still teaching right now at a private school online, and I have my own farm and forest program. So I work with high schoolers and I work with elementary schoolers on a daily basis. So it's a fascinating process to be working with such a wide range of children. Beyond that, I taught social studies at Gaithersburg High School. I served as a building rep with the union with MCEA. I taught preschool. I was an administrator at a progressive private school in DC. I coached JV softball at Gaithersburg and Wooten. So I have a vast experience in education that I really want to bring to the table, and that I feel that is necessary for us to be able to look at the key issues that are taking place right now. So what is it that I want to bring? What is it that I want to do within MCPS? I want to introduce rigorous curriculum, rebuild the foundation of academic excellence. I want to boost teacher morale. I want to meet with them on a regular basis, having open forums and candid one-on-one meetings. I want to look at the budget and make sure that we're using our money wisely. I want to fully staff and fully equip our schools so we can transfer resources back to our teachers and students. And I want to encourage parental involvement by having Board of Education meetings located all across the county. So I'm bringing tons of passion to this experience and tons of just know-how and expertise.
Thank you. Before I go on to the questions, I want to remind everybody that voting for the Board of Education candidates is all at large. Everybody in the county, all voters, vote for all the seats. Districting is only applicable to candidacy. not to voting. So please keep that in mind. You'll be voting for all the seats that are now in the running. Question 1, and this goes to Brenda Diaz. The achievement gap in MCPS has grown over the last decade or so. Do you know about other school districts that have successfully mitigated the achievement gap, and what can we learn from them?
Thank you. That's a great question. Yes, so there are other school districts in that have been successful in beginning to close the achievement gap. Queen Anne's County, from what I hear, has been turning the page there. And one of the things that they've been doing, the Board of Education, is meeting regularly. Well, one in particular made a point of meeting regularly with the superintendent and setting benchmark standards for the superintendent to meet. This was on a weekly basis, and holding the superintendent up to task was a critical point that motivated the other Board of Education members to do the same. I thought that was a critical strategy that he implemented to push Queen Anne's County forward. So that was one strategy. Also, when they looked at the pool of candidates that were applying to their schools, they really wanted to focus on diversity. And so they looked at international applicants, they looked at people from all across the world in their professions. So they hired people who were masters of their content. They hired historians, they hired scientists, and helped them get their education degrees in order to, become proficient also in teaching. So I thought that was an excellent strategy that they implemented. And we can consider those things as a board, definitely. Obviously we want to boost teacher morale, and we want to look at, how we can recruit and retain the teachers that we have. So I like what they did. I like what Queen Anne County did.
Thank you. Sharif Hidayat.
So this question about the achievement gap is a reoccurring theme that nobody seems to have been able to solve. I mean, I hear it all the time with every type of election. What are you going to do about this achievement gap? What are you going to do about this achievement gap? If you've noticed, the achievement gap hasn't been closed. And one of the reasons why is because what I said to you guys earlier, that we don't have the kids coming to school. And when they do come to school, there's truancy issues we have to face. These are real, but it's uncomfortable to talk about these things. So we have to be courageous when we talk about these things and be honest, have an honest conversation about this. We have a truancy problem. We have, once they are in school, they're not attending class. Once they're in the school as well, there is distractions of drug use, violence, bullying, all these issues. And then we're putting that on the teachers. That's a parent problem. We need to focus in on that and providing the services and the help at that angle so that when they come to school, they come to school ready to learn. Once they get to the point where they have all the roundabout services to ensure that they come with a mind ready to learn and then once they get to the facility, to the school, that there aren't any of these distractions that I want to try to tackle, then they're of the right mind. And then we can start talking about the achievement gap from that point. But if we start talking about the achievement gap from the moment they walk out of the house with no services and no help, we're going to continue to be talking about this achievement gap 20 more years from now.
Before I move on, I want to read the question once again, just to remind you. The achievement gap in MCPS has grown over the last decade or so. Do you know about other school districts that have successfully mitigated the achievement gap, and what can we learn from them?
I don't So the way I'm going to respond to that is I don't like to compare apples with oranges. I like to compare apples to apples.
Okay. Yeah. So we're going to move on to Melissa Kim.
Hi. So just the names of school districts that's helped to close the achievement gap. Again, I agree with everybody, closing the achievement gap has not been happening anywhere specifically, but specifically, I'm really proud to have been part of the school system, DC Public Schools, who was recognized with the National Education for NAEP assessments for not only increasing achievement overall, but closing achievement gaps in significant ways compared to other cities and school systems. Miami has also done some really strong work in that area, as well as LA. And I would say that the things that all three of those school systems in that study that they talk about what it took to do that, it is they put a fierce and focused effort on the curriculum that our students have access to. And we've really upped the level of rigor of what our children have available to them. Second, they spent a lot of time in teacher talent development and recruitment and support on the curriculum. And third, there was a concerted effort, certainly even more so post-COVID, to really think about gap closing and interventions. Last couple weeks ago, I just joined a chat about the high intensity tutoring program across the country. When done with fidelity, small ratios of students with teachers with additional time and academics were able to close those gaps. And some of those things are being celebrated across the country. And certainly MCPS, I think, has a lot to learn from ratio as well as time and focus. And, you know, I think a lot of this also goes to, I think the other topic of mine that's a favorite is when children can see themselves supported in the curriculum, when the curriculum is culturally relevant, and it is not something that they have to stretch to see themselves reflected in, they're able to do better. So making sure that our assessments and curriculum are culturally relevant and appropriate certainly has an impact in that high quality curriculum. Was there a second part of your question? Oh.
No, that's it. Rita Montoya.
Thank you. And thank you so much for that question. You know, every year the National Blue Ribbon Schools, the federal government provides a list of schools that are in fact closing the achievement gap. And so I think the challenge for MCPS is that when you look at that list, you're going to realize, and there's actually 3 in Maryland from 2023, 2 in Queen Anne's and 1 in Allegheny. But I think the challenge is that our school district is not like other school districts. We are huge. I mean, I don't think anybody, any of the candidates disagrees with that, right? Like the school district is very different because it is so large. You can't really compare it to other Maryland districts. And then there's the question of when we look at these schools that are demonstrably closing the achievement gap, can we compare our demographics and our challenges? But I do think that we have the tools that we need to close the achievement gap here in MCPS, and that we can always get more. So for example, when we have these tailored programs, you know, we can't maybe cut class sizes because we don't have enough staff, we can't hire enough. It's arguable whether there's enough funding, but we can tailor programs so that students can close those gaps themselves. And there's actually some programs being piloted in MCPS elementary schools now called the WIN programs, What I Need, or sometimes it's just a variation of that program, where students are grouped with other students who are similarly situated. They might need to catch up in an area. They might need some enrichment or extension in an area. And this provides that opportunity. And while there isn't a centralized MCPS data collection system for this yet, even though I think there should be, the early results that schools are collecting are shown to be promising. And so other schools are now trying it. I've done some research on this program, and it can be outfitted for middle schools, high schools, for whatever students need. So I think that there are small things that we can build within the school day already that can provide students with that extra tailoring of instruction to help try to close some of these gaps.
Thank you. Next up, Aby Thioye, please.
Okay, for the question of the achievement gap, I think that what we should do in Montgomery County Public School systems, we need to relook at, have another look to the curriculum. I think that we need to change some part of the curriculum to make it more accessible to the children. If the children are more connected to what they're learning, they're bound to do better in their grade. They are bound to get better in their learning and everything. So my plan would be to not only to change some part of the curriculum, but also to provide to the kids all the materials they need to study, all the materials that are disponible to give it to them. If some kids need some tutoring, so they can be having some extra tutoring out of class to help them beat the gap, and then to help them be more performer by trying more and more to help the children and to help also the school system and the teachers. I think that we can definitely have a better grading for all the kids, the better achievement of all students in general. Thank you.
Thank you. Natalie Zimmerman, please.
Thank you. I think MCPS needs to first be looking at our own data and research and decide what is working and potentially abandoning practices and interventions that are not successful. I think that gets at the next point of what are other districts doing well that we can apply to our own space. And then beyond that, decide if, how are these districts different from our own, and how can we use that to inform our next choices. I do think some of the things that DC Public Schools has done well, they have really strengthened their pre-K programs. I think that that's something that we can do as well here in MCPS that also goes towards Maryland's blueprint. I think we can also do a better job in supporting professional development for special education for all of our educators. Knowing these strategies will help all of our students do their very best. I also want to elevate an example of times that we can abandon practices that are not working. I want to bring up balanced literacy. It's a curriculum structure that has been scientifically proven to not teach students how to read. And instead, there's an alternative program called the Science of Reading. As someone who's in the classroom, I'm intimately familiar with how both work. MCPS currently uses a balanced literacy curriculum called Benchmark Advance. We need to be moving away from this curriculum. We've known for years that balanced literacy will not be successful, and yet MCPS has persisted. Last year, we had the opportunity to abandon balanced literacy, and instead we chose to continue with the program again. Only in this next upcoming school year will all of our students be exposed to structured literacy and the science of reading as their main reading curriculum. I think looking forward, we can see that to help us close our achievement gap. But beyond that, we need to be looking at what other programs do we need to abandon to make sure that our students can continue to be successful.
Thank you. For the second question, we'll begin with Sharif Hidayat. How do you balance student and community engagement and surveillance, enforcement, and police presence in providing school safety? How do you balance student and community engagement and surveillance, enforcement, and police presence in providing school safety?
So is the question kind of like the assumption is they don't go hand in hand, and how do you, because it's not going hand in hand, that we need to balance it out? I'm trying to get to the root of the question. I understand you're asking the question. I understand it clearly, but I just want to know what the root is. Like, what's the cause of this question? Like, where do you see the imbalance?
How do you balance between them? So if you disagree with the question, that's fine. Just point it out why you disagree.
No, I don't I'm asking the question. I'm saying, is there an imbalance now? And that's why you want to say, how do you balance it? Is that what you're saying?
Most public policy is a matter of balancing two goods.
Yes.
And in this case, we are trying to balance also different ways in which to bring school safety.
Okay.
We understand school safety is brought by community engagement,
yes,
student engagement, as well as by surveillance, enforcement, and police presence.
Okay.
How do you balance those two?
I think, yeah, absolutely. Well, I say we stick with the programs that work, like the SRO program. You see, here's the thing. That was a community-based approach to dealing with some of the issues that were going on in the schools. The schools were, when the school resource officer program came about, it wasn't designed to enforce law. It was to try to build relationships, community relationships. I've seen so many examples, because like I said, I worked in the same office as the SROs. These officers would come back to the office and tell me all the stories that they handled with the parents. You know what I did? This guy stole this guy's phone, and instead of locking him up, no, what did I do? I called their parents and said, Johnny stole blah, blah, blah's phone from blah, blah, blah. And I go, oh, great intervention. That's what the SRO program was all about. It was really about mitigating risk, mitigating arrests. But you always hear this rhetoric amongst the political elite in our community that says that it's a pipeline to prison, which is a complete absurdity. 80% of the SR. Did you mute me?
1 second. I don't, did you get it? Did he get his 2 minutes? I'm sorry. I can't see the clock.
Yeah, I was in the middle of a very important point. If I can just have another 30 seconds, just because
Okay, go
of
ahead.
the debate here, is that roughly 80% of the SROs are African American, Black and brown. And that's the population you talked about that was suffering from this achievement gap. These were role models. We need to bring those strong role models like Joe Lowry, PJ Gregory, Brett Medford. I can name them all for you. All of these officers inspired kids to turn their lives around. So until we start addressing that and being honest about that, we're going to continue to fall behind.
Thank you. Melissa Kim, please.
School safety is not just a school sort of issue, it is a community issue. So having student and community and parent engagement to come together to talk about school safety, I think makes a ton of sense. I think, as you know, good policy and good practice sometimes has to go through seeing pendulum swinging way too far to one to the end as we shift our practice and processes. And I think removing SROs from our schools was a pendulum swinging too far. I think we have to work together to find the right balance, because in my experience with school resource officers, they certainly are additive to the school community. Our students, our educators, our school leaders have made great relationships with them. I personally, as a principal, worked hand in hand with my school resource officers to strengthen our community. And where there are school issues that needed follow-up after school hours into the community, our school resource officers were always there, willing, and part of their job to make sure that that happened. Potentially, to expand on the point a little further, at DC school, one of the things we did is to bring all students and communities and teachers together and parents together to discuss school design concepts, because the way our schools are designed right now just don't make sense. So we brought everyone together to redesign schools, every aspect of it, including academics as well as school safety and community, and bringing everyone together to put the issues on the table, to rank order the things that we care about the most and hear from our students themselves about what to do, really then led to each of the schools having a redesign sort of effort, which they're still going through right now. And I would suggest that Montgomery County would do the same. We put the tough topics on the table, we bring the folks together and hear from our students' parents all at the same time together to figure out what we want to do to make our improvements.
Thank you. Rita Montoya, please.
Thank you. Can you just repeat the question one more time, please?
Of course.
It's a bit of a mouthful, and we've had a couple.
It is a mouthful, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
How do you balance student and community engagement and surveillance, enforcement, and police presence in providing school safety?
Okay, thank you so much. That is a really important question, and I'm glad you asked. And it's something that I've honestly really struggled with. I am a former juvenile public defender. I definitely don't want kids arrested and put in jail and things like that. I also, I understand there's a lot of factors that go into the way that our kids behave. There is a need under those behaviors, but sometimes those behaviors are really awful, and those behaviors put other kids at risk. They put staff at risk. They sometimes put the kids that are engaging in those behaviors at risk. So it definitely is a balance. I think that we do need more data from students, from families, from teachers. This is also a place of employment. This is not just a place that we send our kids to go to school. I have kids in elementary school. I'm concerned about what's going on in our middle and high schools because I hear about it all the time, and my kids are going to go there one day. I'm even concerned about what's going on in our elementary schools. I know of an elementary school child that was choked in a stairwell by another child, and it only stopped because a third child happened to walk in. And it seemed that there was little to no consequence for that. And that is very concerning to me as a parent. I do know that kids need connection and consequences. I think that it's a balance of a variety of things. Restorative justice alone isn't going to fix it. SROs alone is not going to fix these challenges. We really need a combination of things. That's, I think, where the data can come in. It may be that there are certain schools that need that elevated level of what, you've framed as surveillance and enforcement. Unfortunately, I've already heard current board members say that they're getting metal detectors. I don't want my kids walking through metal detectors or lining up like they're at the airport to go to school every morning. Can we maybe do without those if we have some other enforcements? Perhaps. Is that really a fix, or is it just a Band-Aid? Do you know how many entrances and exits there are on each high school? Are we going to have metal detectors on each one? I've heard that students open doors and let people come in who don't even belong on campus. So I'm not sure how we think that a metal detector only at the entrance is going to solve all of these issues. So I really think we need to get to the root. We talk to, thank you.
Thank you. Aby Thioye, please.
So, the student I kids, so they're bound to interact. They're gonna interact between them. They're gonna form some, I call it miniature community, where they're gonna have people that they really like, and they are gonna have people that they don't really like. So of course, definitely some problem gonna arise in those community. Definitely, we're gonna have problems between student. We're gonna have problem between student and the faculty members. So, I think that increasing the number of security guard in the school. Also, along with the SRO, is a good thing for me to increase the safety, because interaction are bound to happen in the school, some good, some bad, and the way to solve all the issues are not only to increase the security, but also to have more parents' involvement. A lot of parents are really stuck with their responsibility, so they are not really involved into the school life of their kids. So if the parents become a little bit more involved, so they are called whenever there is a problem with the kids, and they are called whenever there are friction between students, I think that the interaction would be beneficial. But definitely bringing more security guard and bringing more SRO is a good thing for the school system in Montgomery County. Thank you.
Thank you. Natalie Zimmerman, please.
I think that this is another problem where we need to be looking at data. There's currently not enough data on school resource officers to begin with. The data that we do have, though, it does support this idea of a school to prison pipeline. The National Association of SROs, of school resource officers, says that most SROs see their main role as law enforcement, not as mentorship. I think that we need to be also examining the program that MCPS has. We have community engagement officers, and we need to be looking at the data that we have for this. We really don't have much data about this program. It's an MCPS program. What do we know about it? What successes are we having? Where are we failing? I think a different potential root of this problem is the short staffing of MCPS. If there are classroom positions unfilled and paraeducator positions unfilled and counselor positions unfilled, then the opportunities for our kids to connect with those other adults are gone because those adults aren't there. Beyond that, we have fewer adults in the building to connect with our students. We're also not meeting the national recommended ratios for school counselors, school psychologists, and social workers. I was speaking with an administrator at a high school last evening, and I asked her what her main wish for would be in her school, and she said, I need another social worker. That the one that she has is amazing, but she's overworked and she's worried that they're going to drive her out. We know that our students need to feel emotionally safe and supported, as well as having that physical staff presence in the building. I think that we need to be not only looking at our regulations and consequences, but we need to make sure that we're being preventative and not just reactive. I think that restorative justice is something else that we can get into. I'm noticing my time dwindling down. If we're going to use restorative justice, we need to make sure that it's being implemented consistently and thoroughly across our buildings.
Thank you. Brenda Diaz, please.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a huge issue right now. How do you balance community engagement, student engagement, and then at the same time, look at community policing, SROs. So I want to address the fact that the SRO program, when we did have it, was quite successful. When I was teaching at Gaithersburg High School, our SROs prevented many incidents from happening in the building because they got a lot of basically intel from the students about, hey, this student has this, oh, you know, we're hearing about a fight over there. And so because the SROs were in the building, security was able to do their job of monitoring the exits and the entrances. I'm like Rita, I also don't want, what do you call those again? I don't want those, I forget the name, I'm stressing out. Anyways,
Metal
I
detector.
don't want, say it again?
Metal detectors.
Yes, metal detectors. Thank you. I'm like, the things you walk through. Yeah, I don't want metal detectors in our buildings. You know, to me, that feels more like a school to prison pipeline. A community officer, a community resource officer walking through the building and developing relationships like the kind that the SRO did at Gaithersburg High School, like the kind that the SRO did at Quince Orchard High School. We have video of him speaking with the students and and the students speaking very highly of their relationship with the SROs. So that's one thing. So bringing back the SROs and knowing that they do build relationships and they are preventative. The other thing is that, we need to get our students involved in different sorts of after school activities. There's the 480 club, the out of school time club. There's many different activities that they can get involved in. I believe in including parents in what's happening, but also most importantly, just emphasizing that when you institute consequences, you communicate to students that they have power over their own agency.
Thank you. We'll move on to question 3, and we'll start with Melissa Kim. How feasible do you think is a conversation about system-wide school boundary change in 2024?
How feasible is it? I think if
Yeah.
anything is feasible, if it is a priority and we put our resources, both fiscal as well as human resources to it. The success of those conversations is a whole nother thing. I think in order to have those conversations, we need to start from a place of trust and open communications. And certainly in 2024 right now, Montgomery County, I would say, I don't have any data for this, but as a parent experiencing it as a community member, I would say our trust of our school district, our school system leaders, as well as our board leaders is pretty low. We've had lots of superintendent changes over a period of time. And so I think timing really does matter for changes and improvements to school systems. And maybe jumping into a topic of boundary changes in 2024 may not be the best time for that. But again, I'll go back to my answer to begin with. If it is the thing, if it is the priority and we put our efforts to it, I think everything is possible for sure.
Thank you. Rita Montoya. You're muted.
Thank you. There are not positive things that I ever hear that come up whenever these system-wide boundary changes come up, right? People get a little uncomfortable. Am I going to have to bus my child over to a whole different school that's farther? It's going to be harder to get to. We know that some people have transportation issues and things like that. So, the energy around that conversation is never really exciting to begin with. I think then also when you look at the timing of now, MCPS is facing so many challenges right now. I mean, when we talk about achievement gaps, the numbers are just really, really poor. We're still dealing with a lot of mental health issues, school safety issues, all of that. I'm not sure, when we talk about feasibility, sure, you can do anything, but how challenging is it going to be to get people to be engaged, to come to the table in earnest? I'm not confident that this is a good time for that, especially again, looking at the mistrust that the public has. Right? When people come to the table, we want to know that they're engaging honestly with transparency. Even if that's the case, is everyone at the table going to feel that way about the other people? Right? We see some of the board meetings now, it gets really challenging. So I don't think this is a good time to do something like that. I know we do still have a couple of boundary issues we're looking at with the potential new high schools. I've seen those maps. I might be caught up in one of those myself with my own children. So I think that, yes, there's always going to be conversations like that, and they're going to be hard conversations. And if they need to be had, then we make it work and we make it happen. But if we have the choice, it would not be my choice to approach that at this time. I think that we need to deal with some of these other challenges first, get to a good place, and then we can have some of those other conversations.
Thank you. Aby Thioye, please.
May you please repeat the question?
How feasible do you think is a conversation about system-wide school boundary change in 2024?
Oh, okay. So I think that those conversations are going to be really tough from where we are right now, because if we have to change the boundaries and we bring it on the table, it's going to be a lot of talk. It's going to be a lot of a lot of frustration, I would say, but definitely it's going to be hard to address, definitely in 2024. So taking the time to make the change little by little going to be easier than bringing those conversations on the table and wanted to make the change happen overnight. Thank you.
Natalie Zimmerman.
I just want to echo the sentiment that school boundary can be a difficult topic. There are a lot of feelings that come up here. I think that transportation is absolutely one of the most important factors. I bring that up because we want to be minimizing the busing that we're doing whenever possible. I can think of an example like when Harriet Tubman Elementary School opened a couple years ago in Gaithersburg, that when they did the boundary changes there, that one of the key factors was in minimizing the amount of busing that they were doing with students. And I think that that's a win for everybody. Overcrowded schools are also going to be a problem when we look at our boundaries, and then the opening of new schools. I think that if we choose to move forward with a boundary conversation, that the transparency in the process and transparency in the priorities of what we're drawing is absolutely important. I think that we need to make sure that we're breaking this down very clearly and making sure that the math here is absolutely correct, that when any person is looking at it, they can understand, again, what process we went through to get here and what the priorities were when we did so. Thank you.
Thanks. Brenda Diaz.
Right. So, I mean, the school boundary issues have been controversial in the past. And I think one of the main reasons why it was so controversial before was because of busing issues and how those were drawn up. There was a certain debate about equity and such. And so it became pretty contentious in the community. Right now, we have so many issues since lockdowns, the COVID closures have taken place, that however we proceed with boundary issues, as everyone else has said, we need to be transparent about our priorities. We need to be transparent during the process. So I know that the city of Gaithersburg is going to be in charge of the new high school that they're building, that MCPS is building, which is going to be Crown High School. And the purpose of that was to ease overcrowding. So they're dividing it up between Gaithersburg, Northwest, Quince Orchard, Wooten, and Richard Montgomery. My middle girl goes to Quince Orchard, and so they still have the trailers for classes. So obviously the purpose of boundaries, looking at the boundaries and redrawing them, is to ease the burdens that we're currently experiencing, right, with overcrowding of schools. So this goes also back to a safety issue, right? So when we think about monitoring the exits and the entrances, when you have trailers, for example, how do you keep those children safe? That's difficult unless you have an abundance of security, which we don't at the moment. And then on top of that, we don't have our SROs present. So it is something that we can discuss as a community, but right now I think our priorities are so large when it comes to literacy that maybe it's something that we can revisit, but we need to be transparent during the entire process to maintain trust.
Thank you. Sharif Hidayat.
I agree with everything every other candidate said about this. Is absolutely correct, especially Miss candidate Zimmerman. I thought she was very on point about all the criteria. The original question was, how feasible is it? It's very feasible if you have a willingness to do it, and you have the open-mindedness to do it, and you walk the walk instead of just talking the talk. We hear it all the time nowadays. The politicians get up there and say, oh, I believe in transparency, I believe in this, I believe in communication. And then we go to these forums and the incumbent comes in and they are clearly not about transparency, clearly not about effective communicating with the public. So here's the deal. You have to bring the stakeholders to the table. You have to bring the bus drivers, for God's sakes. They're the ones who drive the routes. You got to bring the parents in there. You got to bring public safety in there. And you have to bring politicians who are going to approve the budget for this. So really, the question is it feasible? Yes, as long as people are willing to participate, and then give them the answer at the end to say, this is what we came up with. And I know there's going to be some people who get the short end of the stick. That's the reality of the situation, and not try to sugarcoat it, but be honest with them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next question, we'll start with Rita Montoya. Judicial precedent says that parents can pull their children from public school, but they do not have the right to pick and choose attendance based on curriculum. In your view, under what conditions can MCPS, a public body, allow parents the right to opt out of curriculum materials?
Thank you so much. My understanding of the current law is that opt-out only applies to the health curriculum, and more specifically, the human sexuality curriculum. So, for example, my kids are in elementary school. Next year in 5th grade, they learn about some aspects of reproduction and human sexuality. And I've actually had conversations with parents at my school when they wanted to know my viewpoint. You know, should I have my child stay and listen to that information? Should I not? I had a family that asked me that question based on their religious beliefs. And I said, you know, I completely understand. I grew up Catholic. I'm Catholic. I went to Catholic school all of my life. And the reason that I want to encourage you to allow your child to hear that information is because kids need access to information. You might think that, oh, my child doesn't need to know about that, or they're not going to learn about it. But if they want to learn about something, they're going to find the information. They're hearing information from their peers. They might be hearing misinformation. So don't we want our children to have access to information that is sound, that has been, looked into? We're making sure it's accurate. Kids that don't have information sometimes get themselves into situations that they don't know how to deal with. Something bad could happen, and they might not even have the vocabulary to say, hey, I need some help. This is what happened. So, in that situation, the parent understood. I had personal experiences in high school with girls. It was an all-girls school, who didn't have talks with adults about sex or sexuality or things like that, and they got themselves into some very unfortunate and serious situations. So I do think it's important for kids to have access to information. I don't support opting out of, certain types of reading books or things like that. I respect that the law does allow for an opt-out on human sexuality, and we need to make sure we follow the law. But outside of that, I don't support opt-out of curricula.
Thank you. Aby Thioye.
I do believe and I do support in the opt-out of the curriculum if and only if it violates the parents' beliefs, the parents' religion, and also their conscience. So let's say that my first brother, who's just 6 years old, go to school and is taught about some material that is completely against what I'm teaching him at home, what I'm talking to him, what I'm telling him, what we believe in, what we're practicing in him. So that child is gonna come home, and he's gonna come home very confused. And he's gonna come home and he's gonna ask some question, a lot of question to me, and then I will have to try to explain to him in a manner that he is not gonna shock him, or also he's not gonna go tomorrow to school and say my mom said this to the other student and create more problems. So definitely yes, for religion belief, I do believe that the parents should have the right to opt out of the curriculum if what they think that being taught to their children is against their belief. And also also against their conscience. Some people are not really, some of the people are not really religious, but they just don't want what the kids are being taught at schools. They don't want that to be taught to their kids for their own reasons. So yes, I believe in opt-out. Thank you.
Thank you. Natalie Zimmerman.
I want to echo again that current law applies to the health, or the human health and sexuality portion of our curriculum. That's where families are able to choose to opt out. I want to echo what Ms. Montoya has said, that our kids need access to information, and we need to make sure that students are getting access to accurate information. MCPS's job is to prepare students for their future in all capacities as they mature. And this includes preparing our students to interact with diverse people. For this reason, I do not support opting out of curriculum. Families and caregivers, like with any other subject, they should absolutely be guiding their student in ways that they see fit and help to develop their academics, but also their morals. It's not the job of MCPS or any educator to be a parent, but instead prepare students for the world and to be good citizens. Opting out of curriculum is a slippery slope, especially as we see pushback on things like teaching the full scope of American history and eliminating diverse books from schools and public libraries. Thank you.
Thank you. Brenda Diaz, please.
Yes, thank you for that question. So as everyone else said, right, the opt-out issue is pertinent to family life and sexuality. What's been happening, or what was introduced to MCPS, was that instead of keeping it in family life and sexuality, they have transferred it over to ELA classes at the elementary school level. This is what really upset parents, was that many parents here in Montgomery County want to retain their right to be able to guide their children in their religious beliefs. And we, in the United States, we have the First Amendment, and we believe in the Constitution. We can practice our religious freedoms, and by keeping opt-out within family health and sexuality, we are honoring those families by honoring those families who wish to guide their children. So in that aspect, I feel like we're being a little bit cynical also when it comes to parents. Offering accurate information. We live in a very diverse community here in Montgomery County. I trust our parents, and I believe in our parents to share accurate information about the community in which we all live in. This is something that we have to do every day when we're engaging with our children. So I just feel like that's cynical to think that parents aren't able to do that. Also, in terms of accessing sound information, I think a lot of the problems that children are facing is that they're getting their education from social media. And so we need to revisit their access to screens, to digital media, to their phones during the school day, because that'll also limit the amount of information that they have to other sources about sexuality. So that's my position on opt-out.
Thank you. Sharif Hidayat.
Thank you. Well, you know, everybody has their own opinion about this matter that created so much controversy, really upsetting a lot of parents when the whole opt-out controversy occurred. I think my viewpoint on this is that we haven't defined where the boundaries are, and the school system has let the parents feel and see that they believe that they are more in local parentes. You know, they have taken ownership of the parenthood of these kids when the parents didn't ask for that. What the parents asked for is that they get an education. And there's a lot of hypocrisy involved with this subject matter. You know, when teachers decided that there wasn't enough funding at Veers Mill Elementary School because they lost their Title I status, look what they did. They opted out the kids out of school because of some political reasons. Now you're talking about religion. Now you're talking about people's faith. That's a very sensitive subject. And I think the right way to look at this is MCPS creating more friction with parents, creating distrust, Or do they want to take an approach where, listen, if a parent is genuinely concerned about an issue, they can opt out without consequences? I think that's the better option, is that we don't shove things down parents' throats, creating friction between them and their kids. That's because that's not why they're sending their kids to school. They're sending their kids to school to get an education, and that's it. Reading, writing, arithmetic. And I feel like MCPS has failed on this issue, and they didn't bring people together. They divided people more than they doubled down on it. And now you're seeing a lot of social consequences as a result of it. We need to bring people back together. We need to talk about these issues. We don't need to be shoving down things down parents' throats and saying you will accept or else. That's just not a good approach.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Melissa Kim.
So I've been to a couple forums now and I've heard this question formulated in different sort of ways. So here's how I understand this issue. I think the way in which Montgomery County communicated curricular changes was not good enough. I think if they were to have communicated the curricular changes, showed samples of the books, and read them out loud with folks, I just don't know that some of the misinformation about what the books are or not in elementary schools, I think that would be much more clear. And it's a bit of a shame that it is not as clear as it could be. If those sort of conversations about community engagement, informing folks, being transparent, having a process, like to your earlier question, like, no, should we work on wholesale boundary things? Well, I hope we have done some pre-work to kind of get us ready for that. I think similarly, when we're making curricular changes, I think there needs to be some sort of pre-work to that. Another component of that is that, like, parents are going to opt out. We're talking about elementary school, and right now our attendance rates are deplorable. And people can opt out by not sending their kids to school, and there's not, consequence for that. So, like, really, I'd love for us to get to the core of the issue we're talking about, and I want to make it clear. I 100% don't think it's okay to have kids opt out or have parents choose to opt out of learning materials that are reflective of our community and our culture. And to everything everyone said, our kids need to know these things. That's what public schools are for. And I think there's a small, very narrow window around sexuality that can be opt out for religious reasons. And I don't think the books we're talking about right now are about sexuality. And so thus, it can certainly have a place in our curriculum outside of that particular content, but it is really about clarity and communication.
Thank you. For the next question, we'll start with Aby Thioye. The staff shortage in special education is worse than anywhere else. Realistically, and in the short term, what options exist?
In the short term and realistically, I think that we need to emphasize student. Like when I say student, I say the college student to specialize more in special education. The kids need it, the system need it. We definitely need more educator, and there are a little bit of college students that are going into education and specializing into special education. So I think that it can be done by offering, for example, some scholarship to the student, making them easy for them to access the education, making the college entrance into for a teacher of special education a little bit more affordable than it is right now, helping them more. So we need those educators definitely, and so far we are not working very hard to increase those number in the school for the kids. Thank you.
Thank you. Natalie Zimmerman.
I want to take a moment to point out that this problem is not unique to Montgomery County Public Schools. There is a nationwide shortage of special educators, and this is absolutely a special education crisis that we are starting to face. I think when I look at some of the short-term things that we can do to help our educators and to help retain our educators, we have to look at what workload we are demanding upon them. So many of our special educators are taking home work to do in the after hours to get their paperwork done. So many of our special educators are unable to meet the caseload requirements that's asked of them during the day. I think of my own elementary school where we currently are understaffed a full-time special educator position. Looking at some of the things that we can do to help mitigate that, one that I'd like to look at is that we already do offer our special educators that they have paperwork days to get that done. They don't have enough of those paperwork days, and we need to be increasing their time for those paperwork days. I would also like to suggest other positions that could help with things like our special educators are asked right now to schedule all of the necessary IEP meetings, schedule the follow-ups, and also be data tracking. That's a huge load. If we were to add a position where someone is a special education secretary and maybe they work at one site or just a few sites and they manage some of that for our special educators, that they are in charge of the more administrative tasks that we put on them as well. I think that for a lot of special educators would be a really attractive thing that would make them want to come to MCPS, because they would know that we're not putting as many demands on them, that we recognize the strong demands and that we're trying to mitigate those. Thank you.
Thanks. Brenda Diaz, please.
Yeah, so I mean, when I was at Gaithersburg High School, I had the privilege of having a special educator in my classroom when I taught on level teaching US history. I noticed, and it was unfortunate that many of the times, you know, when we wanted to co-plan, it was just wasn't able to happen because of the caseload requirements. And just all of the paperwork that was required. So one of the ways that I would address the problem, the staff shortage with special education, is by looking at central office, specifically looking at the qualified, highly qualified teachers that are taking positions within our central office and pulling them out from central office and putting them back into the school buildings. I want to encourage so that way we can fully staff our schools. Especially the ones who are duly certified. If there are ways that we can get our duly certified teachers, maybe incentivize them to focus specifically on special ed. So maybe we want to look at different types of incentives, maybe a pay raise or a bonus or something along those lines where it can make it attractive to be, instead of a social studies teacher, or a special ed teacher. And then I'm thinking about the para educators as well. You know, our paras who work in special ed classes, what's really great about them is that they see that student in many different classes often. So they see their progress, they see what they're doing in those other classes. And because they're able to do that, you know, I would get reports about, oh, they're doing this in math or they're doing this in English. We need to also incentivize those teachers to stay within the special ed department as paras. So just looking at paras, looking at central office, and then incentivizing our duly certified teachers to go back to special ed.
Thank you. Sharif Hidayat, please.
So what we're seeing is the reason why people are leaving this profession is it's not special anymore. And here's why. We're dealing still with the effects of COVID. I know people don't want to talk about this, but this is a byproduct of those lockdowns that occurred. What has happened is our students are having behavioral issues, and now teachers are being asked to deal with those behaviors that take up most of the time and that's why they can't teach. And then we don't even put any types of standards of protocol with these kids. They literally have free reign to do what they want to do. That's demoralizing to teacher. I'm an educator myself. I'm a flight instructor. If I have a student come up to me and he's like not really interested, not motivated, he's just showing up and going through the motions because their mom and dad has a lot of money and they just want to pay for a flight instructor, you know, so he can be a pilot. I don't take that student anymore, you know, because it's not worth it to me unless I feel like my job has meaning, which a lot of these teachers, that's what they're going through. The job has no meaning. They're getting a lot of, you know what, from the top. It's top heavy. They feel like the administration's not listening to them. Some of the teachers that I speak to, they said, I don't even know what the Board of Education does. That is a huge disconnect. We have to get back to the basics. We have to get to a point where teachers are not dealing with behavioral issues so they can do what they were trained to do, and that's to teach our kids. This is not a job where you can throw money. What did the president of the teachers union say? She said, you can't technologize your way out of this. Teaching is a human experience. And until we start tapping into the human needs of what a teacher needs, we're never going to be able to recruit quality teachers and maintain and retain them. So that's my answer. Start listening to your teachers, not necessarily the union, but the teachers. Thank you.
Thank you. Melissa Kim, please.
Special education and meeting the needs of special education students is absolutely a big topic of issue for Montgomery County and as well as school systems across the country. And I just don't think Montgomery County can take that as an answer and be okay with that, because I think we do have the resources. I think we do have the talent. It is kind of like your boundary question. If we care about it and it is a priority, then we should do a bunch of things and try lots of different hypotheses to figure out how to support this problem. And I think one of those things I would say is we do get creative about the budget. We should look at the numbers of teachers and the vacancies that are being carried in our schools year after year and know that we're not spending down teacher salaries in that way, and then use that to overstaff that at least by 70%, so that we can start our schools with more teachers that we know through our patterns of usage are going to be left with vacancies like at Natalie School. So I think there's creative thoughtful ways we can use resources that way. And then I think we also should be creative about looking from other school districts of what's gone well. For example, school districts have decided to create their own sort of grow your own special education dual certification sort of programs, make those incentive programs happen. Sometimes they're actually targeting students who are school system graduates. They're actually putting in smart and very needed professional development pathways for teacher paras who are in classrooms, who are looking for ways to grow their profession. How are we investing in them so that they can become special education teachers, and we could create a pipeline through that? That's yet another way. And then I really do think we need to go back to the curriculum and say, what about our curriculum and the student learning experience in our school system is creating it such that our special education numbers are growing? One of the things I encourage school districts to do across the country, and I certainly would do with Montgomery County, is look at the number of students who have special education IEPs. Ugh.
Thank you. Rita Montoya.
Thank you. Can you just please repeat the question? Thank you.
The staff shortage in special education is worse than anywhere else. Realistically, and in the short term, what options exist?
Thank you so much. I think that there is a short term and a longer short term. So in the longer short term, there are two bills that were passed by both the House and the Senate and the Maryland General Assembly this year that are on their way to the governor's desk. SB 937, which is framed as the Grow Your Own Grants program. It basically would provide grants to school districts where there are employees in the school district who would like to become teachers. So it's a way to encourage people and help to offset some of those costs. And it's great because it takes employees that are already invested in the particular school system, and it literally allows us to grow our own. HB 945 changes the process to become certified in the state, to be more efficient, to hopefully attract out-of-state teachers and other school personnel who want to come here. And those both would be effective July 1st of this year. So those are potential, again, the Grow Your Own is obviously more of a long short-term program. But in the immediate, one thing that I've talked to teachers about is the kind of administrative special education teacher. So someone who can just kind of process the paperwork, because there is a lot of paperwork, a lot of recording, maybe notes home and things like that needs to be done. And that takes a lot of time away from the teachers actually providing instruction and engaging with the kids, which we know is the most important. So we want to kind of offset that. Now, it still does need to be someone with special education background because they need to be familiar. So similar to the way we have administrative nurses, something like that could probably work in this setting. I also think that, and because of depending on the level of services our special education students need in the particular program, we might look to volunteers. I recently had the head of a neighborhood association reach out to me to say, hey, we really want to be more involved with our local elementary school. We have a lot of retirees. We would love to come help out. How can we help? And I think that's something that MCPS should just be open to across the board as we look at ways to get more eyes and more hands in the classroom to help out and to keep some eyes on the kids and let them know that they're that care. Thanks.
Thank you. So for the next question, we'll start with Natalie Zimmerman. Is that correct? I think yeah. So we'll start with Natalie. She's at the end of the alphabet list that we have. Mental health support is a long-standing and pervasive demand in the system. Given the social worker shortage and the fiscal situation, what realistically can be done to address the problem?
Thank you. I want to bring back, I've talked about this social worker shortage earlier in this forum, and it is something that administrators in particular are really asking us for, that they know that their social workers are overworked. I want to bring it back again to the short staffing problem, that we are not meeting our nationally recommended ratios for counselors, psychologists, or social workers. And then beyond that, we still have some vacant positions. So those need to be filled as soon as we possibly can fill them. And then we need to be increasing the allocations that we put forth for those anyway. I think that we also, when we think about mental health, we need to get a little bit more creative here. I've heard some students that are asking for things like wellness days, and that's beyond mental health days. I know that there is some statement saying, oh, students already do have excused mental health days. I don't think that students really believe this or that they really understand what that means. I think we need to be pushing that forward of, you have a mental health day to take this quarter. But also students are asking for wellness days where it's focused not purely on academics, but also the wellness of their whole being. I think that can help with our mental health crisis as well. I think we need to think about other peer-to-peer support groups. We know that a lot of our students, while they love their caring adults, they really want to seek out their peers, and that is developmentally appropriate and age appropriate for them to do so. I think if we're looking at things like peer-to-peer support groups, that they need support from educators, they need support from professionals, but it needs to be another way for our students to connect with each other and build those genuine connections and feel connected to our community. I think we could also consider revamping our mental health curriculum, especially K to 12. I'm sorry, and K to.
Thank you. Brenda Diaz, please.
Thank you. So there's so many things that we can do considering that we are short-staffed to help our children with their mental health needs. And so one of the things that we can do is create a safe learning environment. So we want to put in bullying prevention supports as much as we can. And so that's going to require that our teachers develop and continue to develop positive relationships with all of our students. We want to look at family engagement. So making sure that our families feel like they are supported by the community, by our schools. So, reinstituting homework policies, for example, keeps the family engaged on a day-to-day basis. Community events at schools, for example, are a great way to bring families in and have them engaged and to support our students during the day. We want to look also at like cross-age tutoring. We know that like when high school students are working with middle school students or elementary school students, it boosts everyone's self-esteem. And so it's a great way to offer mentorship to our young ones and also leadership opportunities to our older students. So cross-age tutoring is fantastic. Service learning opportunities and alternative programs, after school programs, The alternative programs mostly is thinking about, because you can feel down if you feel like you're not going to graduate or you're failing, right? That's obviously going to affect your mental health. So, how can we support those students who, are struggling in school and looking for ways to help them graduate? After school opportunities, like I said, and also teachers providing them with extra support if they're dealing with high risk students. We know, well, I just know stress and a lot
Seems to
of
be, we're getting some connection issues. But all right, we'll move on. Next up is Sharif Hidayat.
So here's another situation where the school system wants to act again as in loco parentis. They want to be the parent that solves all the mental health issues involving students. This really needs to be primarily focused on the parents doing that. That's number one. You're putting an extra burden on these teachers and staff to deal with these type of complex issues. So my suggestion is that what we should do is we should be, if the school system does want to get involved, they should be a referral service. They should be educated in a referral service. And we see some of that happening right now. Like I get emails from my kids' teachers about, hey, if your kids are going through X, Y, and Z, here's a service for you. So really educating them to be a referral service. Partnering up with nonprofit organizations. We have a lot of nonprofit organizations that do really wonderful work with the youth. Okay. So we need to build on those partnerships. We need to definitely have like a big brother program, big sister program, where older kids are mentoring younger kids. When a older kid, if you think about it, their role models are the older kids in the class. They look up to these kids. So, or in other classes, oh man, I'm going to be a senior one day, just like that person. So we should be in fostering those type of great relationships where a senior can mentor a junior can mentor a sophomore, and have those type of programs. I think we should be focused on that of figuring out force multipliers from within. But the number one thing that I want to work on if I get onto the school board is the distraction of a cell phone. That is creating so much isolation and mental health issues. You have revenge porn, you have all sorts of mental health issues, isolation, harassment, bullying. Social media is a big issue. So really, we need to focus on what's really happening on the ground. That is what's going on the ground, and we can't tiptoe around this issue involving the cell phones. We need to put in some serious.
Thank you. Melissa Kim, please.
So much to say on this topic. Again, like whatever we need to do to make sure that we are partnering with university partnerships, community partnerships to bring in, and you could also contract out for short-term mental health professionals. Many school systems do that. I think we need to make sure that vacancies in our schools don't sit for long periods of time for whatever it takes. And then on top of that, the antidote, all the brain research, I do think we need to integrate and talk a little bit more about brain research into how we do the student-child development of schools. Brain research says the antidote to stress and trauma is, increasing relationships. And that relationship doesn't have to be just a mental health care provider. It could be educators. It could be those SROs we talked about earlier. It could be those retirees Rita talked about earlier, or community members or nonprofit organizations. We just need to make sure that if we think about who made a difference in our lives in our schools, that relationship doesn't have to be just the educator or a mental health professional. It could be a person. I know when I was a school principal, our head custodian was somebody who made tons of wonderful relationship with students and really brought down their anxieties. I also think instead of problematizing this just on students and thinking about this crisis as just happening with kids, we should really think about why is it happening with kids. I'd like for us to again push us to look at the design of the school day and how we structure our schedules and time and what kind of experience our kids are having during that time. It is antiquated, does not create space that's natural for them to connect with their peers or their adults that we have in our school system. And that is just our construction that we could reconstruct in a different sort of way. When I was a principal and a district leader, I made sure that all my team members went to go shadow a student and sit and start from the very beginning of the day to the end of the day to clock the numbers of times that they're engaging with others. in conversation and where they get to express themselves and get known. And those minutes across multiple districts are super, super low. And we as adults have the power to change that and contribute to that.
Thank you. Rita Montoya, please.
Thank you so much. There definitely is a mental health crisis among a lot of our kids, whether they're in MCPS or not. For a lot of different reasons. This isn't just due to the pandemic, though it obviously kind of accentuated things and brought the muck up to the top. Realistically, obviously, we need to fully staff our school counselors, psychologists. I know kids who are waiting for assessments, social workers. But even if we did that tomorrow, it's not going to fix this, right? We need more than that. So I know that, there are some parents who we might want to have conversations with our kids about things, but we don't know what words to use, right? Things are always changing. So we want to make sure that our parents have access to information. I think it's great that we have PEP classes, but how many parents know about them or even go? Are they practical? Are they realistic? Are they things that parents can really implement? So I think that's somewhere where we want to look, because it doesn't matter what we're doing in schools if at home kids aren't getting the support, and vice versa, right? Kids need consistency across the board. So we just want to make sure that kids have support wherever they go. And we want to make sure their adults are equipped to provide it. And we shouldn't just assume that they know how to do that, whether it's teachers, parents, or whatnot. I think that we also need to think about the psychological harm that can happen when there is bullying, when there are hate bias incidents, whether it's racism, anti-Semitism, anti-Muslim hate. There is a new bill that was passed that's waiting for the governor's signature, HB 1386, which does require anti-bias training, but it only requires it for staff, and it's only every other year. So I do think we need to take that further, and MCPS can do that on its own. It can require it for students, staff. It can, Board of Education members, I think PTA leaders even, and even offer it to parents and community members, and should require it every year. I think that we also, and maybe even most importantly, kids need to have options that make them want to go to school. They need to have a thing. I talked to a parent today, their child plays softball. I was like, that's great. That was my thing too. I played all kinds of sports and I played a lot of softball, and that kept my head in the game and kept me focused. It can be sports, theater, music. They just need something so that they want to get up and go to. Thanks.
Thank you. Aby Thioye, please.
When my daughter was in high school, one day I had to go in school and talk to her counselor. So when I went over there with her, so we were sitting and waiting for the counselor, and they were telling me that, for example, this counselor had all the kids starting with last name starting with A, B, C, and D. And while I was sitting down, I was saying, that's a lot of students under one person, right? And we were waiting because she was with one student. She talked to us quickly, and then she went because there were other students that were waiting for her. So I understand that there is a lot of stress under those at school for the counselor. I do understand, because they are dealing with many kids. I think they're understaffed, definitely, and I do believe that bringing more counselors to the school gonna help improve the mental health of the student, and also increasing the program for the student, having more sport available at school, so helping more students to be engaged into those sports, having more after school programs. So helping students being in drama club, in music, in art, in literacy, in debate club. So having more the kids have having more access to programs, to activities, going to help them improve their mental health, definitely. And also talking to the parents effectively. So if the teacher or the school notice that one kid is going through a lot of problems and needs the intervention of a specialist, a psychiatrist, or psychologist. So talk to the parents to make them aware of the kids' problem so they can help their own children. Thank you.
That's all for today. We will see you with the second half of the candidates Tuesday, April 23rd at 7 p.m. From the UpCounty Democrats, thank you to those who joined, and thank you to all the candidates for taking the time. See you next week.
Thank you.